Hello and welcome back, and today I want to talk to you guys about upgrading from your WD My Cloud NAS. Now let's be completely upfront about this. WD My Cloud is a NAS that I have talked about a lot in the last few years, although arguably less so in the last year or so. There was a time when the WD My Cloud series, particularly the PR2100 and 4100, the My Cloud Pro, were very much one of the darling devices that I liked. It came around at exactly the right time. It was a Pentium NAS, it was great for Plex, it had that milestone license surveillance stuff going on, it was inclusive of drives, which some people liked, not everyone, and it was a really good device. However, that was like 2017 or so, maybe even late 2016, and WD, although they've released some Realtek based stuff in the last few years, has to be said that for the most part, WD My Cloud as a NAS system has gone weirdly quiet. We have occasionally seen them announce a new version with larger capacities, and that's just because it's started to use the larger generation of WD Red hard drives. But overall, WD My Cloud as a NAS has gone weirdly quiet over the last few years, and companies like QNAP and Synology and Datastore and TerraMaster for that matter have made these enormous leap forwards in both hardware and software, whilst WD with their WD Cloud OS has sort of gone to the sideline. And a number of users out there during this time who have either owned a WD NAS system or are thinking about whether to buy their next system and have kind of gone, I'm not sure about WD, are now looking at other brands. And that's what today's video is. I want to talk about upgrades from a WD NAS system, whether you've already owned one and you want to jump ship, or you've been looking at them and gone, that's not really for me. What are the alternatives? That said, I'm not going to rag on WD throughout this whole video. It's worth highlighting that there's still some good reasons to look at WD NAS, and it isn't to say that they're totally, not viable in 2021. For a start, as mentioned, because a lot of their systems arrive with their own WD Red NAS hard drives inside, they arrive at quite a competitive price point, and often not only is a WD My Cloud NAS with a similar hardware level on a Synology or QNAP generally cheaper in the favour of the WD, but even when you include the drives, it gets even cheaper still with these drives already arriving pre-populated on their system. Next, the OS, the WD NAS OS system is actually really straightforward. It's not mind-bendingly impressive or anything, but it is very intuitive, it is very user-friendly, and setup takes minutes, not hours or anything like that. With a RAID, is incredibly straightforward and very easy to set up for the first time. On top of that, it has a very low footprint in your hardware environment with low energy consumption, very low background noise, and only really when you hit the high capacities do any of the My Cloud systems, including the Sentinel, I might add, that EX series too, that any of them make any real noise around you. Also, some of the modern generation of that Pro series that I mentioned at the beginning actually have a feature that I've barely ever seen in any other NAS hardware, namely that it has two PSU ports on the rear. You can have a desktop 4-bay NAS that has two PSUs, so it has an external redundant power option. You have to buy a second PSU, but I've never seen a NAS that has two external PSU ports in desktop form. Also, even if you own a WD NAS or you're thinking of buying a NAS for the first time, WD My Cloud NASs, even if they seem arguably a tad more safe or rudimentary compared to a number of NASs from the likes of Synology or QNAP, you can still use them as a second or third tier backup option, whether that is the old NAS that you're upgrading from, or if you're buying a highfalutin NAS, if you've got some money left over, I strongly recommend utilising a WD My Cloud to add another layer to your backup strategy via rsync, real-time remote replication, any of those things, and you can make sure that not all your eggs are in the one basket that is a NAS system. So there is still lots of reasons to buy a WD NAS. It's just they're nowhere near as desirable as they were. So let's talk about some of the alternatives and different areas that you might look at buying one of these NASs and why different ones of these devices brands will be more suitable for you. So first off, if you are a software buyer, if you are buying the NAS not just because of the nuts and bolts and bare metal, but you're also using it for the software services and facilities, then I've got to say the brand you're going to want to go for is Synology. Synology has still to date, I would argue, the best software out there in terms of network attached storage. They don't hold court as much as they used to. QNAP have times have released some of their latest iterations in their software, and particularly that ZFS side of things, that have closed the gap in a number of ways, and some of their cloud gateway stuff, but still nonetheless, Synology I still think comes out on top for their software. Not only because of the wide range of apps, it has to be said, although they do make a very compelling point. Synology Chat, Synology Drive, Synology Office, Synology Surveillance Station, Virtual Machine Utilization, Active Backup Suite, Hyper Backup. They've got great first-party applications that are included with your system. But on top of that, you have got two lovely little features that the majority of desktop NASs include, not so much the top-end enterprise or a lot of the rack mounts. They are Synology Hybrid RAID, which is a fluid RAID system that lets you mix and match drives so you can use different capacities or older or new drives as you evolve your storage system, and also the use of the file system BTRFS, which has faster and lower resource consuming background snapshots, file self-healing as checksums are created when data transfers through the NAS, and faster shared folder duplication and creation. So BTRFS is very, very desirable, and once you put it into the context of some of those Synology apps within DSM, it can be very, very compelling indeed. And overall, thanks to a lot of the applications that Synology arrived with, both in home and business form, the very slick user interface, and with DSM-7 on the way, if you are looking at upgrading or buying your first NAS and software is your focus, certainly software from Synology will be the one for you. But for some people, you're not buying the NAS because of the fancy software. You're getting it because of the hardware, and more appropriately, you are getting it for performance. Internal performance. We've broken down these next two sections into external and internal performance. And let's look at the internal performance first. Now, for that, I've got to say, QNAP is the one for you. If you're looking to upgrade from a WD My Cloud NAS, or looking at your first NAS and you're thinking, WD doesn't seem to have a lot of horsepower, then you need to look at QNAP for the following reasons. First and foremost, no other NAS brand right now has the range of processors that the QNAP portfolio has. Everything from even their ARM based processors, some of those Realtek 64-bit ARM processors, they've got ARM V8 chips there that no one else has. 64-bit, 32-bit, but once you get into the AMD and Intel based processors, you have got your Pentiums, you've got your Intel Core i3, 5 and 7. You've even got graphically enabled Xeons on offer. And then you look at the Ryzens that they were using, the proper Ryzens, and Ryzen 3, 5 and 7. And then you've got the embedded server Ryzens and the likes of that V1500. So QNAP, thanks to that CPU range, has a huge degree of performance possibilities internally. But then after the CPU, you look at the memory utilization with a wide range of memory upgrade options in first and third party, as well as huge support of memory configurations with some of their desktop models going all the way up to 64 and 128 gigabytes of memory across 2 or 4 slots, depending on the unit, which again, in terms of internal performance, chef's kiss. It's incredible. Now, if you move away from the traditional CPU and memory, you can go into some of the other areas where the internal performance of a QNAP is not only good on day one, but allows a lot of scalability, although arguably with a lot more work behind it. First and foremost, you've got on the majority of modern QNAPs released in the last couple of years that are geared towards business, they've all got M2 SSD slots internally, SATA or NVMe. They can be used for raw storage pools, they can be used for caching, they can be used for tiered storage. There's a huge amount of potential there for bolstering the internal performance of that NAS for your home or business needs. But not just one option, there's multiple there for you to scale accordingly and make sure that you get the performance that matters where it matters. But then you've also got PCIe upgrades that are geared internally to the system. So for example, traditionally PCIe slots in the world of NAS are normally reserved for network interface upgrades, something we will talk about in a bit. But in the case of QNAP, there's a lot of internal performance upgrades, everything from 2 and 4 port M2 NVMe upgrade cards that can go inside that later bolt on super fast SSD storage, but also support of graphics cards in some cases that can be used for virtual machine utilization, that can be used with pass-through for things like Plex Media Server. Huge benefits there internally with those cards. And then you've got the fact that modern QNAPs now are starting to support Google's TPU. That is their AI-assisted for AI photo recognition in surveillance as well. These little modules that are out there, the Coral M2, QNAP is starting to support those. And for me, this entire range of upgrades internally on QNAPs is what makes them the preferred upgrade choice, or at least the preferred choice overall from the likes of WD My Cloud. It's a pinch more expensive, but you will get significantly better internal performance overall. Which brings us neatly to external performance. Ultimately, the speed at which you and your client devices, your laptop, your phones, your PCs and whatever can interact with the NAS externally. And again, this is where, once again, QNAP really does rule the roost over the majority of NAS platforms out there right now. In terms of external speed, not only have the majority of their systems got better external speed than most brands, but the scalability and upgradability is hard to rival, at least at the desktop form. In the rack mount, there's a lot more, crossover in some places. So once again, going back to PCIe upgrades, the majority of modern QNAPs arrive with PCIe upgradability, at least some of the more SMB level desktop devices there. And those PCIe upgrades extend to 2.5, 2.5, 5G, 10G, 20G, 25G, 40 gigabit Ethernet upgrades there. So again, a tremendous amount of external bandwidth option there that is just not available on desktop form from WD and their My Cloud series. But it's more than that. Without upgrades even in mind, a lot of the QNAPs now, pretty much all of the QNAP releases in the last year and a half, have all arrived with 2.5 GBE connectivity. Not the real cost-effective end, but pretty much all of the others. So 2.5 GBE, 5 GBE and 10 GBE has always been the case as standard on a number of their devices, sometimes in multiple ports, sometimes in just the one. But it's the idea that you can get some real affordable stuff at 250 quid and get greater than gigabit Ethernet connectivity on the rear of the devices. And then on top of that, you have got, of course, Thunderbolt NAS, their own range of Thunderbolt NAS devices that allow you to connect a QNAP NAS system via Thunderbolt to a connected PC or Mac system. And therefore, instead of relying on network connectivity, instead of relying on Ethernet connectivity in any shape or form, you've then got the connectivity to use Thunderbolt. Connect through, and although it's not as plug and play as the likes of traditional Thunderbolt DAS, you are going to be using Thunderbolt over IP, it has to be said that you can still achieve speeds there of 1,000 megs relatively easily based on the media you've got inside. And then you can move over to wireless connectivity, where QNAP either has support with some devices having Wi-Fi 6, or with upgrade cards, it might slightly be off shot there, you can upgrade a QNAP NAS to have a Wi-Fi 6 connection, which can be dealt with either directly from your PC client or Wi-Fi 6 client handheld device, or onto a Wi-Fi 6 enabled network and get greater than gigabit connectivity wirelessly. That's why QNAP is the best for external connectivity, especially when compared against WD My Cloud systems. And as an upgrade, if you are looking for something where the interaction with your external device and the NAS in question is better than you've ever had with WD and you want the best possible, probably QNAP's going to be the one for you. Of course, it would be remiss not to talk about WD My Cloud and not talk about Plex Media Server. A number of people purchased the WD My Cloud Pro because of its superiority in the world of Plex Media Server, arriving with a Pentium and hardware transcoding in the early revisions at least, not needing a Plex pass and actually having hardware transcoding for free. It was a very appealing system. But in more recent times, with WD My Cloud Pro systems, PR2100, PR4100, Plex on these is not quite as good as it used to be, and we're seeing more and more reports online of people's Plex performance on these systems kind of dip a little bit or encounter the odd problem. So a number of people are moving away from WD My Cloud NAS for Plex Media Server, and so arguably for this video, should they go Synology or QNAP? And I'm going to say both. I know that seems like a bit of a cop out there, but in terms of Plex Media Server, both Synology and QNAP bring something slightly different to the party, and it's going to depend on you, the user of the Plex Media Server, to understand which one's better suited for you. Synology brings a lot of simplicity. It's much easier to set up, and certainly with Plex Media Server, it's a lot more seamless and experience. Arguably, the performance is not as great as that as QNAP, as we'll talk about in a bit. When it comes to getting a NAS for Plex Media Server though, and for less mucking around and just want it to do the job, then certainly Synology is almost certainly going to be the one for you when it comes to Plex. But the reason I would still say, despite all of that, that QNAP certainly has its place here is because, as mentioned earlier, the majority of QNAPs have superior hardware. They have superior CPUs. They have the ability to add graphics cards with that transcoding power, and that embedded graphics being surpassed by that of a graphics card usable in Plex will mean that you can have a Plex Media Server from QNAP that can really deal with the hardcore stuff. It can deal with that heavy 4K transcoding across multiple instances. Indeed, there's another thing with QNAP called CYAN, C-A-Y-A-N, which allows you to have support of H.265. For those that aren't aware, HEVC, the majority of dense HDR 8-10-bit media needs that to run smoothly. Otherwise, the system has to auto compress, it has to auto transcode into H.264 or a more playable format, and that's where, again, the additional horsepower in a QNAP in Plex will see you through. But again, bear in mind, the QNAP devices I'm talking about are more expensive, and therefore comparing them against My Cloud is only if you're like, yep, I want a QNAP NAS with some real future-proof in it. Which brings us to the last area with a number of people moving away from WD My Cloud NASs, and that is for business. They bought a WD My Cloud early doors because their business was quite small, maybe a one-man operation, maybe a small business with less than 5 staff, maybe a small shop, couple of cameras, something not too aggressive. And over the years they've grown, their data has grown, and their requirements have grown, and this is where you can look at bigger NASs, more aggressively powerful NASs, and this is where you look at which brand, Synology or QNAP, is bringing the most for you as a business user in business software or business utility. And again, not a cop-out, but both brands bring a lot to the table here. And all of it comes down to a simple choice: first party or third party. If you are buying a NAS and you want to use its software, you want to move away from the cloud, you want to move away from Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, stuff like that, and Google Office Space or whatever it's calling itself, it was G Suite. If you want to move away from all of those services and go into a centralized ecosystem that's closed, the Synology platform has a lot of applications that replace third-party apps. I touched on a number of them earlier, but let's really drill down into them. You've got Synology Chat, which is a viable alternative to the likes of Skype and internal messaging. You've got MailStation, Synology Mail, that allows you to move away from those third-party mail providers. Then you've got the likes of Synology Drive, which has got the user interface and synchronicity and live file streaming that you would compare to the likes of Dropbox and Google Drive. You have got Synology Office, which is a viable alternative to Google Office and Office 365. Then you can move away to more business-led stuff. So you've got Synology Virtual Machine Manager for hosting VMs on your local area network. So you can have your staff with their own dedicated VMs that you can clone, duplicate, edit, roll back, snapshot, the works. Then you've got Synology Surveillance Station to have multiple cameras dotted around your home or business environment, then have a real enterprise class surveillance system to monitor it through. Then in terms of backups, you have got Hyper Backup, which is a multi-site, multi-tier backup system for USB, NAS to NAS backups, NAS to cloud backups. Talking of cloud, Synology have their own cloud platform in Synology C2 that you can synchronize with your NAS, although it is a paid subscription service. It allows you to synchronize your data on multiple sites, but still within the one ecosystem. You've got Active Backup Suite, which is genuinely a paid premium software included with your NAS at no additional cost for synchronizing and backing up the likes of virtual machines, backing up desktop clients, backing up just multi-sites and arranging it in a single portal environment. Synology's big thing is not only simplicity and ease, but also that you shouldn't have to resort to third-party tools if you don't want to. And Synology, over the last few years, has evolved and just absorbed and created their own versions of everything, which is why their platform is great for the first-party user that wants to buy an all-encompassing solution. But if you want to use your pre-existing software appliances, Office 365, G Suite, or Google Office Space, or whatever it calls itself, if you want to use your own systems, but you want to use a NAS to integrate with them, I think QNAP is the better choice for you. QNAP support of third-party apps as well as a more customized system that allows you to tell the system where you want your files to live, and then it will change itself accordingly. QNAP will be better to adapt there. It's got a steeper learning curve, and all the things I'm describing will require more work, but QNAP will adapt to third-party services easier with less friction than that of a Synology. In some cases, it will simply be the only way to do it. That isn't to say they don't have good first-party apps. Virtualization Station, I still believe to be the best VM app out there. Hyper Backup Sync, although in recent times has really taken a bit of a kicking over QLocker, it has to be said, at least the overall design and what it can do, I still think is one of the best out there. Although, as I say, QLocker, you've really put a shadow on that, guys. You've really put a shadow on that, guys. But on top of that, you've also got the likes of BoxSafe, which is their integration with those third-party Office tools we just mentioned. On top of that, you have got Hypervisor for cloud-based synchronization and backups. You've also got all of these tools in the cloud gateway of virtual JBOD and hybrid mount that allows you to bolt on cloud storage or bolt the NAS onto cloud storage in blob form. QNAP's ability to synchronize with third-party apps is something that Synology just can't do as well because of that priority to the first-party system there. But nonetheless, both of them are great for business. It just depends on what kind of business you are and what you want from your data. And when choosing between these two to move away from your WD Cloud NAS, do know that whichever one you go for, it will be an incredible jump away from WD OS. And again, I'm sorry if this video seems like I've been really giving a kicking to WD here and their NAS. I'm not really saying that. If you want your NAS to do one or two things, maybe three, very well, WD is good for that. It's great for centralized backups, it's great for set up and forget, and it's great for a contained system, but it's just not very evolved over the years. WD NAS has not changed much in the last 2 to 3 years, and Synology and QNAP systems have gone leaps and bounds. Thank you so much for watching. If you are moving away from a WD NAS system, do know there is a link in the description to an article at NAS Compares that goes into more detail, and of course you can use the free advice section over at NAS Compares, manned by myself and Eddie the web guy. If you've got a question, it's free, it's unbiased. It might take us an extra day or so to get in contact with you, but bung us an email. We will try and help you every step of the way with your data storage needs. Thank you so much for watching. Click like if you enjoyed it. Click subscribe to learn more, and I will see you next time.